I'm delighted to be with everybody. I want to start by just congratulating all of us for getting here. You know, it's been such an incredibly busy time, and I know that there are things pulling us in every direction. So thank you for joining us. I also think this is an excellent time for us as an industry to be reflecting on who we are and who we want to become. And I think Martin Reynolds, if you had the chance to listen to him this morning, did just an extraordinary job of reminding us about our purpose and how our purpose honestly needs to be examined really carefully, especially as nonprofits. So my name is Fraser Nelson. I work at the Salt Lake Tribune. We are a newspaper that's been around in Utah for 150 years almost. Will be 150 years next year, and have been the independent voice here in Utah. And like a lot of other newspapers, we've gone through a series of changes in ownership and in structure. And the last one really brought us to INN when we became a not-for-profit organization. We are, as far as we know, the first legacy metropolitan daily newspaper to become a nonprofit. And it's really changed things for us in many ways and not changed things at all in others. I mean, we have a very clear and continuing commitment to the kinds of journalism that Sue was just speaking about, the investigative journalism, the local journalism. But really what has changed and what we're going to be talking about today in this panel is our relationship with and our responsibility to the community we serve. And we say now, as a mission-driven organization, that we are community-led and supported. But it's taking us really a while to get our heads around what that actually means. And it's hard work to tell the community what that actually means, because when they hear we're owned by them, what they need to hear is, you need to give us money. You need to give us money through subscriptions, through donations. You need to support us in new ways. So we heard from the IRS in November of last year, so we haven't been at this even a full year. And we have had to make some very significant changes in our business model. One thing that a lot of people don't think about when they call me and say, we want to become a nonprofit, the first thing they don't think about is that Paul Huntsman, who was prior the owner of the Tribune, gave away a very significant asset. That stops people in their tracks often. But if they're able to get their head around the current owner of their newspaper making the donation of an institution to the community, which is really what Paul did, the next thing is there's a whole series of business iterations. We changed our HR, we changed our bank. I mean, all of these kinds of things that really we built a new nonprofit. And most of you started nonprofits, and you know that that can be complicated. But the biggest change, I think, has been the change that's occurring in the newsroom as it thinks about itself as a nonprofit. That is a much slower transition. It's, I think, a very delicate one, and it's one that's really being led by our editor-in-chief, Jennifer Napier-Pierce. The other relationship is the relationship with the community. And so, as I said, we've had to change things in two ways. One is what we're asking the community to do on our behalf and with us. And the other is our relationship to the community and increasing our dialogue and commitment to them. Now is a fantastic time to be responsible that way, because we need to be having very deliberate and sometimes difficult communications as a community about race, about policing, about these kinds of issues that are certainly in the forefront. But we also need to have conversations about what our responsibility is to the readership. And as a nonprofit, taking funding has caused a lot of discussions both at our board and in our newsroom. We just had one this morning about being really transparent about where our support comes from and what we do with that support. So the first line of defense, as you all know, is asking for individual support. But the Tribune was not willing to give up the source of revenue it had with subscriptions when we became a nonprofit. So here's something I think might be helpful for those of you that are looking at gaining supporter revenue. We created a program called the Supporting Subscribers. These are people that make a gift in addition, or in essence, pay more for the subscription to the Tribune. So the Tribune itself remains behind a paywall. We had a lot of input from our friends at Republica and Texas Tribune and others saying you should drop the paywall. And of course, the American Journalism Project really encourages to do that. But we're a growing concern. With 60 employees, we publish a print newspaper every morning. We couldn't just turn away the revenue that we had, what little there was, really. So we kept the paywall, the meter, as Tim Griggs constantly reminds me to say, and we asked people to make a donation on top of the subscription. Now, because we continue to have a meter, not 100% of that gift is deductible. So what does this mean really in financial terms? People right now pay an average of $7.99 a month or $79 a year. Supporting subscribers are asked to pay $15 a month or $150 a year. We thought we'd be really successful if we got 40% of our current of new subscribers to come in at the supporting subscriber level. We're over 50%. Not by much, we're at like 53%. But that really changes the customer lifetime value of those relationships. First off, people at the $150 level, the churn is lower. You don't have to ask them every month to remember to renew. And they're giving us basically almost $100 more for their subscription than they would be if they were at the regular level. So that's meant a lot of different messaging. How do we make sure that people understand that their willingness to pay more equates to our ability to continue to bring them good journalism? And the board has had a big hand in debating the right model and making this decision to be a hybrid and not dropping the meter entirely, and to set the pricing at a level that we think is reasonable. Basically Netflix and a couple other markers that we looked at. The other thing is that we've really had to change our community engagement. We heard earlier from Steve at Mother Jones about their Major Gifts program. We've been able to institute something called the First Amendment Society, and we're asking those individuals to make multi-year gifts, but also we're asking them to engage with us intellectually about what the news is at the Tribune and what it could become. We've really upped our Facebook Live game. We've done a lot more engagement, and frankly, having to do it virtually has made it easier for us, less time consuming, and people are engaging more because they're able to get there. They're not having to make a really special trip. So I think it's been actually helpful for us to have to become more virtual in the way we interact. Now, one thing that we need to do is make sure that stakeholders have equal access to engagement with us. We don't want people who give us gifts to be the people we listen to exclusively. So we need to do a good job, a better job of bringing new voices to the paper. And one way we're doing that is working with Brigham Young University, which is a university that's owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and is down in Provo, Utah. And we've asked students there to really do a good job of auditing what's been on our editorial pages, and to ask them to help us reach out to more unlikely voices, younger voices, in our case, more conservative voices, people of color, younger people of color in particular, to make sure that our editorial page and our op-eds and letters to the editor really reflect the diversity of our community. Places I think we really can improve are our comments page. It's just a disaster. Everybody hates it. The comments are generally just nasty. What can we do virtually to improve the way that people create civil and civic dialogue? So we're looking at working with groups in Utah that already do things like that, like the Humanities Council and others, to try and be a leader or assert our role in bringing people together to discuss complex issues in new ways. And clearly, chief among those right now, and for a long time, is going to be race and policing. Salt Lake has not been immune to racial discrimination and to use of force. We had a young man, 22-year-old, Bernardo Castillo, who was shot 20 times while running away from the police just the other, and the Tribune was the first to post the video of that shooting. We've been at every single protests that have been ongoing since the beginning of all of this. But what we haven't done a great job of is engaging deeply with the Black community. So we've been holding a series of discussions, the first of which was on racism. Tomorrow it's on policing, and the third will be on solutions. So our engagement with the community needs to be deeper, it needs to be authentic, and it needs to include both conversations and financing. We need to make sure that when we said we're, board-led, community-led, and community-supported, we need to make sure that that's actually true. So the onus is on us to constantly be having conversations with the community that result not just in a deeper relationship with our stakeholders and an authentic and vulnerable relationship with our stakeholders, but also with the stakeholders that can help us stay in business. How do we balance that as nonprofits, especially as a legacy newspaper? How do we balance the input of people with deep pockets with those who probably don't have deep pockets, with people who subscribe to our newspaper, and for those that we want to be able to read our newspaper, whether or not they can subscribe? Working through all of these things is really a complicated but important journey. It's one we're just beginning. As I said, we've been at this since November, and we certainly don't have all the answers. So groups like INN, all of you that are helping to teach us, there's my timer, are really critical. And we welcome always your input and your thoughts about how we're doing.